Hi, I welcome. I am Mike. I'm from the now Tsuchiya lab. I'm a new PhD student. Welcome to the Journal Club, Chuyin.
Yeah, my name is Chuyin, and I'm also a PhD student from the same lab at Monash University.
I'm Lipeng. I'm also from the same lab, but I'm research assistant currently.
And I'm Anson. I've just joined the lab recently last month as an intern and hopefully do a PhD with the lab down the line. Yeah.
All right. Now, the paper that we are reading today is a 2011 paper named Consciousness Cannot Be Separated from Function. It's an opinion piece by Michael Cohen and Daniel Bennett. Now, at the beginning, the author introduced the common, suppose, observation that our visual experiences is immensely rich, but our ability to report based on these experiences are very limited, it seems. Now, a number of researchers, so-called dissociative theorists, have made the argument that perhaps we experience more than we can cognitively access. They commonly cite some of the experimental examples, for example, the Sperling partial report paradigm. Now, just to quickly explain it, imagine a 3x3 grid, and on each one of these grid, there are one individual letters, 9 letters. If the participant just see it for a few seconds and then ask to record it, they probably can only record only a few of it. But if you, let's say the researchers, instead of asking them just to report all the letters they see, instead ask, hey, please record the letters from the first row or the first column, it doesn't matter. Participant can do that, and they will say, hey, record the second row, record the third row, and participant can actually record all the letters they saw this way. Now, this was used as an example to show that participants actually have seen all these letters, right? They don't just see the few that they remember. They see more than they can record. They just need some cues to help them along the way. Another commonly cited example is what we felt when we are not what we see when we are not paying attention to something. Now, imagine you are paying attention to an object in front of you, whatever it is. You are still seeing all the other things in front of you. You're just not paying attention to it, right? It's not like you can only see what you focus on and all the other parts are darkness. You see more than your attention allows you to access. Now, the author of this paper disagrees. The author of the paper believes that phenomenology does not overflow our cognitive access. Why? Well, they argued that in the partial report example, where they use some kind of cued reporting, it's plausible that perhaps some sort of unconscious memory is involved, right? The participant stored the other letter unconsciously, and the cue just bring them back into consciousness. So it doesn't have to be the case where, the participant consciously experienced all these letters. And also in the attention example, the authors argued that there are two types of attentions. One is the focal attention, where you are focusing on something intentionally, right? But there are also distributed attention. You don't see darkness beyond your focal attention because you have this distributed attention across your visual field, which is what enables you to actually experience all these things. Now, the authors also cited a few experiments against this idea of we see more than we can access. For example, change blindness, commonly cited example, right? You show a participant an image, then you show them a mask, you show them a somewhat altered image, and participant can't tell a difference, right? If they are consciously aware of the picture, they should be able to tell the difference, according to the author. And another example is the Sperling paradigm, but instead of using letters, they introduced unexpected pseudo letters, and participants couldn't recognize that either. So it seems to, according to the author, seems to suggest that the participants are, overestimating what they can see in a sense. Now, moving on, the dissociative theorists also believe that consciousness is induced by brain states that are, separated from all the cognition, all the cognitive stuff. So the author believes that such claim is in fact unscientific and cannot be tested. They ask us to imagine a thought experiment where in the distant future, a neuroscientist or surgeon, I suppose, can separate the projection from certain part of the visual system to the higher cognitive areas. For example, like the color, let's say. So the color still works, whatever brain area it's involved in. That brain area internally still works, everything's fine. But the projection to the higher cognitive area was severed. In fact, the projection to all the other areas are all severed, in fact. The authors asked us to imagine what would the participant respond if you show them a colored object and ask what color do they see. The participants, since there's no projection from the color area to the higher cognition, the participants are likely to say that, oh, I'm colorblind now. I can no longer see colors, right? So in that case, it seems that even though there may be an argument to be made that the area that were separated, that were isolated, still in some way experience cognition, experience color. There's just no way for participants to export it one way or another. Now, you may argue that, say, what if we give this isolated area some sort of reporting mechanism? The author would argue that if this reporting mechanism necessarily involves some kind of cognitive components, and when you introduce it, then you can no longer be sure whether the cognition is necessary only for the communication, or is it necessary also for the conscious experience. So in fact, there is no scientific way, even in this perfect, future example, that we can actually demonstrate the participant definitely experienced color based on these certain brain states, that is. The author then moved on to argue that any psychological studies requires participant report. And all participant report necessarily involves some sort of cognition. So it seems rather impractical to try to separate the two just from an attempt at trying to understand what consciousness is through the common psychophysics or cognitive methodologies. At the end, the author made perhaps a higher level critique on these dissociative theories. I will quote. The author asked, what does it mean to have a conscious experience that you yourself do not realize that you are having? What does it mean to be conscious of something but not be aware of it? It seems internally contradictory in a sense. It seems intuitively that consciousness has something to do with cognitive access, have something to do with this awareness of what it is, what you are seeing. In conclusion, the author concludes that the hard problem of consciousness exists because we have defined consciousness in a way that we cannot investigate it through scientific means. And if we alter this definition, we can probably reclassify this problem, and perhaps even it no longer is a problem. And that's the conclusion of the paper. Have I missed anything? Did I explain the thought experiment well? I feel like I didn't really do a good job explaining it. Alas.
Mm.
It makes sense to me. I think that's
Yeah,
okay.
it
Yeah, that's
makes
great.
sense, but I think there's at least this is an important detail to me, that the authors mentioned that in that perfect experiment, the participant will still be able to identify that they see an apple even without any color experience. They can identify the object as an apple, but without color. Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot to mention that all the other areas are all intact. It's just the connection, projection between the color and all the other areas are separate. That's the
Yeah.
only, separation.
Yeah. Mm, nothing. If
I'm a bit confused as to the purpose of that thought experiment there. What it's trying to say is that there's no conclusive result coming from the experiment. Is that what it's trying to say? Like that experiments alone cannot falsify the dissociative theory? And then it goes on to say that therefore there's no experiment that can falsify the theory. Is that what it's trying to say?
I think you can have your own understanding. In
Oh.
my understanding, I mean, after I read this this perfect experiment, I think it should be regarded as a thought experiment, because the potential results argued by the authors might not be true. I will say this is an empirical question, but we cannot really, I mean, at least so far, we cannot really have that experiment. So to me, it sounds like a thought experiment. Because yeah, in my mind, colorblind, I mean, isolating the color experience does not mean participants are colorblind. So it's like without color, I mean, no color doesn't mean darkness, something like that. So to me, without color, I'm not sure if the participants are able to identify the object as an apple. Probably not. So at least to some extent, I don't agree with the potential results proposed by the authors. But again, there's no way to justify it or see the results. So I will take a step back and see the perfect experiment described by the authors as a thought experiment, so we can have our own understandings. Yeah.
My impression of the thought experiment was essentially that without a connection to cognition, it's impossible to verify what the participant is experiencing.
Yeah.
So
Like whether they're, sorry, please go on, sorry.
Oh, no. You can please ask questions. I mean,
Oh.
I've already sort of
Mm.
explained. What question do you have at the moment?
So does it mean that what I take it to be, it is quite vague. There's only 2 paragraphs that explain the purpose of it, and there's heaps that go through what the experiment is about. And what I think it's trying to say is that when you sever the connection between the color area and the higher order area, which is quote unquote just language in that sense, if that is severed and you ask the patient, what color do you see? And the fact that they don't reply will have two would lead to 2 conclusions, 2 possibly true conclusions. The fact that they cannot reply, you can conclude from they are not sure what the color is, that there's no color experience at all. They don't see color, period. There's no conscious experience of color, or they do have conscious experience of color, but they cannot convey that because
That's
of the connection.
that's exactly the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think what he's trying to say is because this patient, which supposedly would have conscious experience but cannot report it, so therefore this is like assuming the dissociation is true, you cannot still distinguish whether they have conscious experience or not. Therefore, the dissociative theory is unfalsifiable. I think that's what he's trying to say. I'm not sure. Yeah, that's to my interpretation. I'm not sure if others have some more, ideas.
I think that's the
Yeah.
correct
Yeah.
interpretation.
Yeah,
There
I
are
agree.
three possibilities. Impossible to separate.
It sounds like the authors are saying a conscious experience is only meaningful when it's accessible. So
Yeah, reportable.
the overall
Hmm.
impression of me after reading this paper is that the authors do not want to distinguish between phenomenal experience and an accessible experience. I don't know if you have the same feeling.
Yeah, so I want to add it that if a participant if that's the case that the author want to separate the phenomenal consciousness and cognition consciousness, for this argument, if there's some component, for example, in the box 2, if there is some communicatable component in that color area, then if this color area has been isolated, that means that we eliminate the reportability of this color experience. Then if there is no no cognition component in this area, then the author will conclude that we have full ability to report color, but without conscious experience. So that means that we can imagine two circles if they're interval like that.
It's a bit
Oh,
difficult
sorry, I
to
can't
To
say
turn
that.
off the
melting into the
visual
background. Yeah.
I'm sorry. For example, like that, if they
We
overlap,
yeah.
that's what I want to say. So I agree with you, Anson, your interpretation.
What I want to add, however, is it's counter to the point that's where I'm a little bit confused. Got an idea of something that I've learned already in undergrad, but I'm not sure how that fits into the picture. So I probably need some help. So it is something called a split brain patient, where the patient has no connection between the left brain and the right brain. And in these patients, because of the way in which language is lateralized in the brain, specifically towards the left over to the right. So that means that the left hemisphere will have more of the language capacity compared to the right. And because of the way in which visual information is conveyed, that is crisscrossed, contralateral, you've got some interesting experiment. I've got a link that I want to share, actually. It's probably just best to show you the clip rather than me explaining. Is it all right if I share the clip, Mike?
What
Is
Copyright
this
issue?
paper?
Oh, was it a copyright? Oh, that would be
there may
copyright.
it depends on what video it is, but there may be.
It's a YouTube video.
If it's public,
Uh,
then it should be. I'm not sure, Mike.
we may get copied.
I mean, how long is the video? It's
Probably going to show a clip of about 2 minutes. Yeah, it shouldn't be long.
2 minutes.
Or I can
It
just
should be
explain it out, but that will,
It's better if you can explain. I do agree.
Okay. So basically, there are a few informations. First, of course, that the language capacity is lateralized predominantly to the left, and the right has little to none language capacity. And second of all, the left visual field is usually processed by the right brain, the right hemisphere, and the right visual field is processed by the left brain, right, or left hemisphere. Okay, so therefore, what you will have when you see something on the right hemisphere in a split brain patient, when you see in the right visual field, that will go into the left hemisphere, and then you can report what that is. So for example, in your right visual field, you see an apple. Then in a split brain patient, that will tell you, this is an apple. If you put the apple into the right visual field, now that, the left visual field, now that information is going to the right hemisphere, which lacks language capacity, which therefore the patient cannot tell you what the thing that he saw or she saw, right? Now, the interesting thing is that this language capacity, well, rather than doing a sort of a speech, which is what the language capacity that I've referred to, there's also the written component. And in the written component, both hemispheres are intact. It's a lot of information, but basically means if you see, just to put everything together, if you see an apple on your right visual field, it goes into your left hemisphere. You can talk about it. And you can also, when I ask you to write it with your right hand, which uses the same left hemisphere, you can write it, apple. If I put it into the left visual field, that information is going into the right hemisphere, which lacks speech capacity, so you cannot talk about it. But when I ask you to write it out, you were still able to write out the word apple. So therefore, that is here an instance in which if you put an apple to the left visual field, you would have the conscious experience of seeing an apple, but speech-wise, you cannot convey it out because the area itself is lacking. Hopefully, does anyone understand what I mean?
We understand what you mean, but how can you talk more about the relationship between
Make a conclusion?
Okay, so the conclusion would be that in this split brain patient, on the left visual field, it will have conscious experience but lacks cognitive capacity. Quite similar to the thought experiment that we have.
Can't they just write it down though?
Sorry?
Can't they just write it down?
Yes, but speech-wise, they lack the capacity to talk it out in speech.
But they don't have to have. It's not necessary. Just cognitive capacity can have a lot of cognitive capacity. It doesn't have to be speech.
It doesn't have to be reporting. Okay.
Do not has to be verbal report, but the reportability, for example, if the judgment or writing or drawing is capable, then we can say that the cognitive function is feasible, right?
So there will be some cognitive function that's still there instead of in their example where it's completely segregated from all the other parts.
It's quite different.
But that's a good example for the novice audience to understand what we are saying, I think.
Yeah. The contrast, certainly.
Okay. Can I say that when I read a book called The Conscious Mind, David Chalmers, he also claimed that we want to separate the function. He also want to claim that the consciousness is about the function aspect and the phenomenal aspect. So the function aspect is about the cognitive, which is reportability, introspection, and then the wakefulness, like that. And the phenomenon aspect is about the redness of red, the greenness of green, like that. But the reason why he want to separate these two things is just to make it clear, but not to say that these two components are really individual thing. So I'm a little bit unsure or confused about this the basic claim of this author saying that this thing many scientists say that these two things are completely separate. Where does it claim come from?
I think it's just from intuition.
It may be from the author's interpretation or so about the completely disassociated. I'm also not sure whether or not other researchers' claim can be interpreted as completely.
I think they give like a few different series that they describe like three, like the recurrent processing.
Yeah, local recurrence.
And micro consciousness. Like probably they were trying to target these kind of series. I would imagine, where they say there are these specific brain areas somewhere that can work by itself without the cognitive components.
I see. It makes sense.
Do you still remember Now's paper talking about consciousness and attention? 2007? That one? You don't know? No one knows
And
it?
then
I think I've seen it, but I can't remember.
I think
if it's
that one is the highest cited paper of Now's publications.
what is the why do you mention that paper?
Because the title is it's already clear enough. I'll find it. The title is Attention and Consciousness, Two Distinct Brain Processes.
Oh,
So at least they think that's by Cogant now. So they think attention should be disassociated from consciousness.
What were the experiments that they conducted, or is it review paper, perhaps? I can't remember.
and then also I want to ask that what do this paper talking about consciousness? What does it mean by consciousness? Is it phenomenal consciousness or anything else? It's a little bit unclear.
I
Let
can't
me check
remember the
that.
details, but if you all of you don't remember this Now's paper, it's meaningless to discuss here. So that's my bad. I thought you probably gonna remember something. So yeah, it's my bad. No point to discuss further on something we don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. On the subject of something we don't know, have anybody read the space paper by Juan and Tonani that was sent in the
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to propose that one as our next paper, but it's quite long. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Well, I'm not did other people read it, or is it only two of us?
Wait, which one?
Chen
The
shared it in the Mattermost channel,
Oh,
paper
I
channel.
didn't.
Okay, I'll just describe examples instead. One of the several examples that I have listed that try to argue that we see more than we can access. One of them is the famous example is blind sight, where the person can't see, they are functionally blind, but phenomenologically blind is probably the better way to put it. But if you force them to walk around the room, they can dodge obstacle pretty well, even though they claim they just see blackness, right?
Mm.
So it seems that in that case, it's the functional aspect of the cognition still working. It's still identifying an obstacle in the environment, but the phenomenal aspect is off. It's gone. Right? Another example is the attribute amnesia. So essentially, imagine four letters on the screen. Three of them are black, one of them are colored. The author would ask you, okay, among these four letters, which of them are colored? The person pick one. They do 150 trials. Then at the end, they ask, what color was the letter you just see? Participant couldn't answer. They don't know. Even though they use the color to separate this letter from all the black letters surrounding it. What color? They have no idea. Well, if they use this information functionally to separate them, then why don't they not know if access equals phenomenal experience? So this is another example where you can functionally do it, but you don't have phenomenal experience. Or maybe you have reverse. You have phenomenal experience of it, but you don't have memory of it. You can no longer consolidate your memory. So these are the two separations that were not covered in this paper we read today. I wonder what explanation would Cohen give to these examples?
Yeah, right. Yeah, notice there is there's a longer than 1 decade gap between these two papers. So many, I mean, much more new evidence might have come up. Yeah.
And also, you remind me of a non-report paradigm, especially in the animal research, right? So, in human research, we ask participants to rate the similarity, which is also cognitively do the similarity judgment. But in animal experiment, we just observing their behavior or any other behavior index to as a similarity index. So I'm wondering how this author will comment on this kind of non-report paradigm. And yeah, that's what I'm thinking when I'm reading this paper.
Yeah, I remember no-report paradigm is one example that might come up after the publication of this paper. It's quite recent thing, right? If I remember correctly. Yeah.
Wow. Hmm.
Explain more about the paradigm. I'm not quite familiar with that.
Non-report paradigms means that, for example, we detect instead of asking participant to directly verbal report or doing a button press judgment, we using something like eye movement to detect whether they have consciousness of some stimuli.
Yeah, and also record maybe brain activities by neuroimaging techniques.
Yeah. The research question maybe is whether participants have conscious of some stimuli, and we use eye movement, body, or neuroactivity instead of verbal report. Does that make sense? Okay.
Right.
Um,
And I can understand. To some extent, I understand why the authors made such a claim about their about future studies of consciousness. And I think even though people in our lab like us might say emphasize the importance of phenomenal consciousness, we probably have to admit that it's very, very difficult to investigate, to measure the phenomenal part of consciousness. And as the author says, it's not very falsifiable. And then, yeah, thinking of this, so I understand why the author proposed a different pathway of consciousness studies to approach a more falsifiable model or so. Yeah, but to me, phenomenal consciousness, it's something that yeah, if you ask most people, they will say it exists. We do have that part of experience, although it's very hard to study. Yeah. So we cannot skip it, to me. Yeah.
For me, I feel like the difficulty is mainly in study it independent of cognition. I don't think that's possible. I think you have to study both at the same time, in a sense.
Yeah. Yes. That's the difficulty of separating phenomenal from, say, cognitive consciousness or accessible consciousness or so. Yeah.
And also what we can do, or what we are trying to do, is that instead of very high level or very complex cognitive function, for example, like explicit verbal report, we use a more simple way like similarity judgment or button press. That's how we minimize the requirement of cognitive function. And this minimization can also apply to animal experiment, right? That's
we are getting closer, but ultimately what it's like to be a bat is a unsolvable problem, I will say.
Can we do that next time? Can we do the Thomas Nagel's paper on bats?
Oh wow, that's
Uh,
great, I think.
It's too philosophical.
yeah, that brings me back PTSD from doing philosophy
I would say
classes.
it's scary to me.
Fine. We don't wait. Fine.
Yeah, let's decide later. Yeah.
All right. It's just on the higher level, try to bring it up a little bit. So I think in two places, Owen mentioned this idea where he doesn't understand what it means to have conscious experience that like ourselves are not not aware of in that sense. So I kind of want to know people's opinion on this. Like, is it that counterintuitive to have conscious experience that we're not really aware
Sorry, we're
Sorry.
not really what? The last part?
of? I will just use the quote again. Hopefully, it will be more precise that way. What does it mean to have a conscious experience that you yourself do not realize that you are having?
Is that still conscious?
Yeah, do we still admit that? Yeah. I
Like,
mean,
is
we
this
don't have to
consciousness?
admit that,
Or,
right? I don't think we have to admit that, right? I don't think that we have to admit that it is consciousness, right?
Yeah.
what do you mean by admit that it is
Like
conscious?
we can just like why is he asking that question? I mean, I want to have a look at
It's asking that because in the dissociative series, it allows that situation to exist. That's a possible scenario in the dissociative series picture of consciousness. In their picture of consciousness, it wouldn't exist. If you're aware of something, you are conscious of. If you are conscious of something, you are aware. Cognitive access equals phenomenology.
Mm,
I don't think the dissociated series claim that kind of thing.
I mean, imagine that it's the same thing, right? Imagine if the certain brain area of related to a qualia is activating, but it's not consciously accessed. Or it's not
No.
cognitively accessed, sorry. There's no higher cognition related to it. It's just if something happens, experience, but no cognitive access.
Really?
I can kind of imagine such kind of scenario. For example, if you smell something, but if you don't pay really attention to it, we cannot consciously experience that kind of aromas or smell. And I also feel that the author want to claim is that this associated theory is not good for scientific research because it is not forcible.
Yeah, that part I agree.
Or falsified.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what he claims. But this kind of situation might be possible theoretically or logically.
That part I agree. But imagine if you are smelling something and you don't pay attention to it, you probably don't know what smell that is, but you will feel something unusual, right? Or maybe in Sperling's paradigm, Sperling mentioned a term iconic memory. It's a part of the memory, but it will fade away very quickly. So after 1 second, you don't know it, but that doesn't mean you are not cognitively accessible to it.
So would you say that all experience must be accompanied by some sort of attention or memory or whatever cognitive aspect?
Yeah, I mean, even for those disassociated series, and they don't claim a completely disassociation between cognitive functions and conscious experience. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, well, I think it would depend on the exact claim, but I think I agree with you to an extent. Maybe the claim they are trying to make an extreme claim to make their point.
Yes. But anyway, I understand like Lipeng said, the author's aim of making such an argument because of the falsifiability. Yeah.
I wonder if it is actually falsifiable. I mean, I'm gonna challenge the point. I'm not sure if that's I don't think I'm warranted, to be honest. I don't think I'm support. I've got enough support, but I can think of like an experiment. Like think of it with the same perfect idea, but rather than having a permanent severance, a permanent disconnect, you have a temporary disconnect. So, for example, if you show someone an apple, and then at the same time you disconnect the color with the higher order, and then you remove the apple, and then you allow the connection again, and you ask them to report what color it is. If they can report the color, but no, that requires memory though. No, that requires memory. Yeah, that requires memory. Yeah, this is hard. No, just ignore
Yeah,
my secret.
but you can have a thought experiment. Yeah, you can say, and after that you disconnect the other part, but then reconnect the color part. It sounds complex, but if you yeah, think about it deeply, you can make another thought experiment. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm, yeah, maybe you can post it on Twitter and after we upload this video. It's fine.
Stability. Any other questions we should discuss?
Maybe a minor question for intuition. Without color information, so imagine you don't have any colors. Are you able to know, to identify an apple? It's an apple.
How do you call something a color? Do you just call them without hues, but with luminance, or do you take away luminance as well?
Like the perfect experiment described by the authors.
I don't think you can, right?
If we are just taking out the hues of just by edge detection, it's possible, right? Like
Yeah,
the
but
shape of
without even hues, like without even like colors, like no black and white, and there's no edge.
There's no texture.
Oh,
You don't know it's a metal or it's a metal ball or something, or even extremely, there's some fruit called apple beer. You don't know if it's a beer, sorry, apple pear, if it's a pear or an apple.
but I
It
think
looks similar.
you can get pretty close though, right? I mean, you imagine the black and white dots that come together to form a picture. Have we seen this sort of thing before?
Like
yeah. Like a dog that was just black and white dots, like distributed across.
The Gelstar principle example, I remember.
Something like that, probably. I mean, in that case, would you say that it's without color, and yet we still can recognize something out of
it? You have black and white.
I do, but I mean, you need to allow some form of like edge detection, right? Even without the color experience. So there would be luminosity difference somewhere.
Yes. If then it sounds like a flaw of the perfect experiment. How do we detect the age, the age of the object, if without color, say without light? It probably needs to be clarified.
Possible.
Yeah. So maybe it's not that manner. Okay. I see. I see. I see the key point here. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions?
And I want to ask that in what degree you guys agree with the argument the author made? Yeah, I am mostly is 70% of agree, maybe
70%?
I don't know because
No, don't.
Do you remember the last time, the last thought experiment posed by Matthews, right? So in that experiment, I want to explain it to Anson. So in that experiment, we assume that we can record the brain activity and then we can replay. So we ask participants whether they see the greenish of a green, and then if they see that, they can click the button. And then the problem is that when we replay this activity, the whole brain, or the motor area will also be activated. So we don't know whether they really conscious experience of greenness when they press the button. So that's an example that I want to say that cognitive aspect of consciousness is highly correlated or with the phenomenon aspect of consciousness. So that's why I say maybe 60 or 70% of agreement. So what's your opinion?
To me, if it's allowed to say this phenomenal consciousness, or say this associative series, and what the authors are proposing are not exclusive. So they are just different pathways. They can exist at the same time. If that's allowed, I will say higher than 90% of agree with the authors. They propose a new pathway that makes sense to me to find a falsifiable way to study consciousness. Yeah.
Mike, you seems very
But if it must to be one out of the two, then it's a different question. Yeah.
okay.
I just imagine if Chen's here, she would be jumping up and down on this issue. I'm probably more like 30% agree with the author. I think yes, you have to engage in the cognitive aspect to be able to see the reports, and but I'm not convinced by the author's evidence that phenomenal aspects have some reliance on the cognitive aspect of it. I feel like the evidence is quite contrary. It seems the dissociative series are, at least for me, more convincing in that what we see are more than what we can access. That's my position on the issue.
Sorry.
I'd like to agree with all of you. And I agree with the author. But what I think he's doing is to attack a very easy target, because what he's attacking the opponent is quite a strong dissociative, saying that there is a distinct mechanism for consciousness and there's a distinct mechanism for cognitive aspect functions. And what he's saying is that these two are not distinct. I think that is a very strong claim that he is attacking, and therefore quite an easy thing to agree on. But what I would say is that the idea that cognitive functions is necessary for consciousness report, that here is a very, as I say, is a very weak claim. What I think will be a more interesting question is whether cognitive functions alone are sufficient to describe consciousness. And I think that's what Mike is disagreeing on, right? Is saying that there are more to consciousness than just cognitive functions alone. And I don't think the authors have addressed whether it is sufficient. It's just saying that it is necessary. And the sufficiency part, it's hard to say what he thinks on, to be honest. I have to, it will not be apparent. Yeah.
I'm quite sure that Daniel Dennett was a functionalist, so I would imagine that he would leaning toward explaining consciousness as input-output relationship, what it can do, rather than what it is, I suppose.
Okay. That would be interesting to read as well. Even
Yeah,
for a strong claim like
and
that.
even though you don't agree with the author's argument, I guess you will agree that the argument will make the dissociated series better and more sound. Yeah. You can't imagine that?
Can you elaborate in what way? Is it because that the dissociative series can learn from this example and maybe do something with their series? Is that
Okay, like the authors believe that this associative series claimed that functions and consciousness are completely dissociated. So this might be some ambiguity in the nature of this associative series that previous researchers ignored. So in the future, they can clarify it further to just clarify. So yeah, if that's the current author's misunderstanding, it will be clarified, and if it's not, then it can be solved. So it's an issue that need to be solved.
All right. Any more questions? If not, that will be it for us today.
Okay.
All
good.
All good. All right. Thanks for coming. Well,
Thank
maybe
you.
we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Good discussion.
See ya.
See you.